Here are the tools you'll need to do a pedal rebuild today. A crescent wrench, some adjustable pliers of sorts, a pick, a small hammer, and if you are going to replace your Igus bushing, you'll need a tap, either a 1/2 inch or M13. You'll need a torque wrench that you can set to 4 Newton meters, and with an 8mm bit, some grease, some Allen keys, and then some alternate tools you can use. If you don't have a set of picks on hand, you could use a flathead screwdriver. And if you have a set of vice grips, I would prefer to use those over the adjustable wrench. So the first step in rebuilding your pedal here is removing the axle. To start this, you need to remove the rubber axle plug at the end of the pedal. That's there to protect the inside of the pedal from the elements. So you can use your fingernail, your pick, or your flathead screwdriver to remove this. I'm going to use the pick here. Grab the corner of the plug and lightly pull it out. And then you can set this aside. Once removed, this will expose your axle screw. This will require a 3mm Allen key, so grab your 3mm. And note, this is the left-hand pedal, so the internal threads here are right-hand threaded. And on the other side of your bike is the right-hand pedal, and that contains internal left-hand threads. So grab your 8mm, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Once you break the axle free, you can use your hand to unthread the axle from the axle screw. Unthread that and slide the axle out. And also note, this is a brand new pedal, so yes, things are going to slide apart fairly easily compared to a well-ridden pedal. Because of this, the inner bearing and bearing spacer came out with the spindle when I removed it. There are 2 bearings left inside the pedal body, and those will go out toward the left portion of the pedal. So put that your axle aside, along with your axle screw, and then now we're going to remove those 2 bearings that are on the left side of the pedal, as well as the V-ring, if it hasn't fallen off already. Just grab that, set that aside, and then to remove those 2 outer bearings, grab your 6mm Allen key and your hammer, and give that a light tap, and you can put some tape or a cloth at the end of the pedal to prevent from scratching the body of your pedal. Now, reminder, since it's a freshly built pedal, it's going to be pretty easy to remove. The next step, I'll show you how to remove the bearings in a pedal that has been ridden for a lot of miles. Now I'm going to walk you through how to remove everything if you have a lot of miles on your pedals. It's the same initial step. You grab your 3mm and your 8mm Allen keys. Loosen the axle a little bit, but only loosen the screw a couple of turns. By doing this, you can install the 3mm Allen key again into the screw and use your hammer to knock the frozen spindle free by tapping on the end of the Allen key. Another technique that works is to reinstall the pedal on the cranks on the bike, remove the spindle screw, and yank the pedal body off until the pedal body comes off of the spindle. After removing the spindle now, the inner bearing and bearing spacer will likely still be stuck in the pedal, unlike what you're seeing here. In this case, I'm going to reinstall this bearing and spacer just to show you how to go about handling this. So I'm going to drop these right back into place. Make sure they're in there. And note, this is not a step you'll likely be making. So now, in probably your scenario, the bearings are not going to want to fall out by hand if you tap on either side of the pedal. So I'm going to show you how to get these out when they're frozen in there. There's a bearing spacer, 2 outer bearings, 1 inner bearing. Now imagine if your axle and screw are no longer in there. All that's left is the 3 bearings separated by the spacer and a matching standoff in the body. So now to get that out, I would use a small Allen key, like our 2mm here, or you could use a pick to dislodge the bearing spacer off to the side inside the pedal. And then you can tap on the inner race of the bearing to dislodge the inner bearing out of the pedal, removing it, kind of similar to how you would remove bearings in a mountain bike hub. So I got that Allen key in there. I was able to pop out that inner bearing. And now we can do the same step as last time and grab your 6mm Allen key and tap those 2 outer bearings out of the pedal like so. So now here's our full disassembly here. We have our axle, the V-ring, we have our 1 inner bearing, our bearing spacer, our 2 outer bearings, and our axle screw and the axle plug. Next step here is to replace your Igus bushing. As I mentioned before, you only need to do this if the bushing looks very worn out. This could be cracks, discoloration, grooves, or gouges in the bushing itself. If not, Just you can leave it in and it'll work for a long time. The easiest way to remove an Igus bushing is a tap. You can use a 1/2 inch or an M13 depending on what you have on hand. One way to do this is to hold it in a vise if you have access to one. If you have the pins in, you might want to use some small blocks of wood to hold it flat so it doesn't scratch your pedal. But I'm going to do it today by hand with just a tap. And you're going to slightly thread this in. I'm using the M13 here. You can start threading it in by hand. Once it gets hard to turn, grab your pliers of choice. I'm using a crescent wrench here. And then thread that tap in so that half the threads are left showing outside of the pedal. This will allow the tap to grab the plastic Igus bushing securely for removal. And now I would go ahead and grab your adjustable pliers or vice grips. I prefer using vice grips, so that's what I'm going to use here. Grab the pedal body with one hand and then attach your vice grips with the other side. Make sure they're nice and snug. Tighten it up a little bit more. Grab onto that. Now gently wiggle with your pliers and we'll pull that Igus bushing right out. And also make sure don't reuse that Igus bushing. It goes in the trash. And grab your new one out of your rebuild kit. And then you're going to use a rag. You can use some isopropyl alcohol, some degreaser, clean out the inside of your pedal body depending on how dirty it is. Make sure you get all that grit and sand out. Take your new Igus bushing, slide that on your axle without the V-ring on there. Make sure you don't have any grease. It's designed to go in without any grease. And then kind of see if you can start that by hand. Grab your hammer, give it a nice light tap to get the bushing started. And once you got it in there a little bit, give it a little longer taps to hold it in place. Get it down until it sits flush inside the pedal. Now we're going to grab all of our parts to put the pedal back together. If you're doing a simple clean and rebuild using the existing parts, give everything a good clean to remove the old grease and dirt. Now if you purchase one of our rebuild kits, then put aside your old parts and grab the new ones. Your rebuild kit will come with the following: a V-ring, your bearing spacer, 3 sealed enduro bearings, axle screw, and your axle plug. And yes, the rebuild kit comes with double the parts so you can rebuild your full set of pedals. If you choose to replace your axle as well with an axle kit, go ahead and grab those. On the other hand, if you're reusing your axles, which is what I would do unless your axle is showing any signs of damage, you can use some Scotch-Brite or light emery cloth to clean up those silver bearing surfaces if there's any rust built up or grime. So now since we are rebuilding the left-hand pedal here, we want to make sure this is the left-hand pedal body. Imagine you're sitting on your bike. This is the left side of your bike. Here's your bottom bracket. The Praxis logo should read left to right. And there's also going to be a leading chamfered edge of the pedal that is designed to glance off objects on the trail. And now we want to make sure we pair this left-hand body with the correct left-hand axle. This will have left-hand external threads. There's also a small groove that runs the perimeter of this flange right here. And this is a universal mark to denote left-hand threads. It also has right-hand internal threads at the end of the axle. You want to make sure you grab the left-hand specific axle screw. This has right-hand threads to match the right-hand internal threads of the axle. It will have a smooth head on the screw as well. This is done to keep the axle from unthreading during use. For example, here's a right-hand axle screw. This has left-hand external threads and a knurled head. Now, grab your V-ring and your axle, and there's one way to put on the V-ring. The V-ring has an angled lip to the left and a flat side on the right. That flat side is what's going to go up against your axle. So slide that on with no grease. And then grab your grease and throw grease on the inside of the V-ring or the bearing surface. Now take that grease, spread it around a little bit up there against the V-ring. And before I install the bearings on the spindle, I just want to show you what a complete axle assembly looks like. And for those with sharp eyes, yes, that's the right-hand axle assembly. This is what it looks like roughly over your pedal body. So since it's the right-hand axle assembly, it does have the knurled axle screw at the end there. And then you have your bearing spacer in the middle, your one inner bearing, and your 2 bearings that go out to the left. And then you have your axle screw that holds everything together. Now we're going to go through the final pedal assembly here. We already have our V-ring installed, so we're going to go and put our first bearing on. weight. Don't forget to put a little bit of grease on that axle before you slide the bearings on. Just put some right there and then spread that around a little bit. You don't need that much. Now grab that bearing, slide it on, and grab your small bearing spacer as well. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is we're going to install those 2 outer bearings into the pedal body. So first, grab your grease, throw a little bit inside the pedal body to help the bearings slide in easy. Then do one bearing at a time. When you do this, it makes it easier. Grab your 6mm Allen key to help push those into place a little bit so it seats all the way down against the lip inside the pedal body. Just give it a little tap, make sure it's fully seated. You won't have to push that hard. You can see it's down there correctly. Now grab your second bearing, the same process. Knock that down into place. And then double check that the bearings are down there correctly. Now slowly slide your axle into place. You might have to shimmy it to get in between the bearings there. And once you can see the axle is almost to the end of the bearings, grab your appropriate axle screw, thread that in. And if you are reusing your axle screw and you're not using a kit, make sure to put some blue Loctite on there. Use your 3mm Allen key to tighten that up. Get it as snug as you can. And then you're going to grab your 8mm Allen key to tighten that up snug. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey there. Tighten her up. And once it's snug a little bit, then we're going to grab your torque wrench. Set your torque wrench to 4 Newton meters if you haven't already. You need an 8mm bit at the end. Then take your Allen key, tighten her up. Once it clicks, you're good. And the last step here is install your axle plug. And note that it's shaped like an oval racetrack and with 2 flat sections. Those 2 flat sections will be towards the top and bottom of the pedal. And then you should be able to just push that in gently. Try not to overly bend it. And once that's pushed into place, your axle's finished, and there you go. Ready to go ride. Pedal, make sure it spins nice and smoothly. If for some reason it's not spinning smoothly, you might need to take that apart again, go through the instructions, and check the manual to see if you installed everything correctly.